Hey everyone, welcome back to AWS Connections. My name is Nick Raboy, and to my right we have Michael Palermo. We're going to be doing the first episode of our current series of episodes. I'll let Michael explain a little bit more on that in a second. I want to get into the logistics behind this particular episode. This is a live stream, so if you have questions at any point in time, please go ahead and add them to the chat. I'll be moderating. We have a few other moderators. We have Peter Malahan, who's going to be in the chat. We have Mallory Lux, all part of here. Another logistical part is become a subscriber. Subscribe to our channel, get notifications. You could even donate what Twitch is calling bits to our channel, which we'll be sending to charities. But enough on that. What are we up to today, Michael?
Well, we are starting, as you mentioned, it's kind of a new theme for these AWS connections, and it's going to be addressing how to use the serverless application repository. And so that means there's multiple ways that you can access our APIs. And if you're an AWS developer, you might be interested in discovering what channel might be available for you to access some of our APIs through that serverless application repository, which ultimately means many things that are configured that ultimately end up in a Lambda that you're calling to get the data. And today, we're going to be focusing on just map image. But in future episodes, we're going to discuss other things such as weather and places and some of our other APIs. But today is just all about map images. So that's what we're going to be doing.
Sounds awesome. We ready to jump right into some awesome stuff?
Let's do it. So here's something that's going to be interesting for all those that are tuned in and you're thinking, okay, map image. One of the things that I really am going to enjoy about this one, Nick, is that each episode, all the subsequent episodes in this theme of serverless are going to follow a similar pattern. And that pattern is going to be, let's first see how it's done without using serverless. Let's actually see how it's done with our JavaScript API, with our RESTful API, and then finally, what does it take to use it within the realm of this serverless application repository. So in order to get started, let's bring everyone into what would it take to do in our JavaScript API, just so we have that anchor of what we're talking about.
Awesome. So, and we're currently seeing your screen, so all is good here.
Oh, good. So what I'm going to do is what you probably see right now is just the basic structure of an HTML document.
Yeah.
And I'll expand the head section here to show that these are all the things that I'm adding in the header section to the appropriate scripts so that I could utilize our JavaScript API and get the full rich API right here in this web page. Does that make sense to you?
Makes perfect sense. And I can see you're using the latest version of our SDK, which was recently released, right?
Yes. So this is definitely going to be a fun demo because it's not just showing a map image, but it's truly showing our interactive map through this new JavaScript API. And we'll see what makes this different. I'm going to expand the body, and as I scroll up a little bit, in fact, I can collapse the head section since we just see what the references are. As I scroll into the script tag, first of all, you'll notice that in our div tag up here, I've given it an ID of map, so I can reference that later in my code. And I've applied some explicit styling for this particular map. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's coming to my mind that why are you using fixed values for your width and height? Why not use the viewport width and height?
Probably because I was lazy.
This is something I got called out on too in a previous episode, so I'm just
so
spreading the love.
That you called me out. That's great. How about this? How about we show how it works with this approach, and then you could show us how to fix it to show the other approach. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
So then I get into the section where I have this let m equals. So I'm going to expand that. All I'm doing here is setting up what I would call initializing all my local variables into one thing that's all anchored to this variable called m.
Is there a reason why you chose m? Does it have a meaning?
M means model, means module, means money. I mean, there's no specific reason, so you can call that variable whatever you want. You wouldn't technically have to have them all anchored to one variable. I just like to see them all listed together, so that's it.
Sure,
but I'm glad you called that out. Hey, now anything interesting about line 19?
Yeah, we have an API key instead of an app ID and an app code, right?
That's correct. So I want to call that out. I want to show everyone how you get this value, because it's actually in a different spot than it used to be. Or let's say it's in a spot that you would expect it to be, but maybe the other values are in a different spot. So we'll call that out. Sure. Ultimately, all the code here is pretty much the same as what we would typically see in our JavaScript API, where we're setting up the platform, initializing it, we're creating our layers. But do you see anything different on line 43?
I do. Instead of using a default layer, normal map, I see you've thrown in vector in there.
You are correct. So that's going to give us a little bit of more flexibility and more interaction with that map.
Sure.
So, but because this whole episode isn't about this, we're just calling it out.
Just curious thing, real quick, Ben. With the vector option, do we have all of the same options for dark mode and light mode and traffic and things like that?
You know what? That is a great question. I would say I don't even know, one, if they're all the same or if there's even more possibilities. Because I haven't explored this one to its
very
full
new
capacity. It is very new. But yes, I know there are some more options there, but you're calling me out to remember it, and that's one of those things where it's like, hey, go consult our docs and find out for yourself. So, okay.
Sure, that's what I do.
So then ultimately all I'm doing is displaying this map. So let me show you what it looks like when we call this code. This is the code running right now. This map via JS API, 3.1.
Sure.
So it's an interactive map. So because we're calling it through our JavaScript, API, I can zoom in, I can zoom out. But if I do happen to zoom in, and if I were to hold the Alt key down on my keyboard and start to, move with my mouse, I could start panning and getting that third dimension. That's something we have now as a value for using this new JavaScript API right out of the box. So that's really nice.
That's part of 3.1 specifically, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Okay. Now, I also want to go back over to the code. You're going to, if you can, walk me through. What can I do differently here in order to be compliant to Nick Raboy's call out?
Hey, it's not even compliant to Nick Raboy's call out. This is Babs D, who was on last week's episode, who's called me out on it.
Okay.
So just change the width to 100 VW.
Mm-hmm.
That's the viewport width, and then the height could be 100 VH. But because we're using the full width and height of the viewport, you probably want to remove line 14.
Gotcha. Okay, so we'll trust the title and the header tag to give any metadata for the page. I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
So go back to the page and refresh.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, there we go. So we're using the full screen, and again,
there's a little bit of margin in the body, but that's fine. We get the idea.
Yeah, we get the idea. Okay, thank you. That was so fun. By the way, as I did call out before, I'm going to show my project page right now. So my project is called Evangelism Demos here. So in the JavaScript section, you will see that I can create an API key. Now, the API key that you saw here in my code is the one that is referenced here in my project. It used to be that this was also the same location where we had the app ID and the app code.
Sure.
That has moved down to this section for REST and XYZ Hub, CLI. So this is where we get those values.
Now calling you out again to test you here. If I still wanted to use my REST app ID and app code, could I with 3.1, or is it strictly a token kind of thing?
For 3.1?
Yeah.
For 3.1, you must use the API key.
Got it.
However, you could still use these values in 3.0.
Yes.
And you can also, of course, as you said, use them in REST.
Got it.
Okay. So let's go now and understand that this was the code that was necessary to bring that interactive map using, once again, our JavaScript API 3.1. Now, let's take a look at what it would be to bring in an image via REST. So header section, do you see that I'm referencing any kind of our APIs in our header section?
Nothing as of now.
That's right. In the body, I have an image with a map, with the idea of map image.
Sure.
And that's it. So the SRC is not set, just blank. And then I have that M again. Lowercase m, who knows why? It just is lowercase in this example. But you'll notice I have my app ID and my app code here.
Yes.
That would be the values from that REST API area that we saw in my project details.
Yeah.
Wait. And please.
So I'm looking at, maybe you haven't gotten to yet. You're not including any scripts as of right now. How are you accessing the SDK?
Oh, who says I'm accessing an SDK, Lottie?
All right.
I'm not.
All right, perfect.
This is why the title is called REST.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Bypass that whole thing and just use a RESTful API.
Well, I don't even think I see a script to execute a REST API command. Maybe it's not necessary.
You don't see it.
All right, perfect.
So in this example, here's what I've done. So in order to construct the URL that you see here,
yeah,
the URL is going to essentially be itself, which starts with this line.
Sure.
And I'm going to pass in all the data points that are from up here.
I see it now.
And you'll see I don't use the width like we did in the previous example. I'm actually requesting the specific size, the specific dimensions in my REST call for the width and the height, and of course the zoom level. So I have all this data ready, and then in my line 23, I'm accessing our map image, and I'm setting its source to be the result of this URL.
Got it. Yeah, so I guess I didn't realize that the source was consuming the URL directly.
It is. So when you call our RESTful API, this is a good thing that you're bringing up here, Nick, because when you consume our API directly, you can just set the source tag to that call, right? Just the way you see it here. Here's the URL, and let's set the source to that URL as if it was an image itself, right? So let me go ahead and switch it. So now that you see all this on the screen, let's see what it would look like when we execute it.
Sure.
Yes, that's the, whoops. There we go. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, I see it.
REST. So of course I'll refresh this, but this is calling the REST API right here, map via REST. You can see the rest in the title. Okay. So now we have seen two ways. Did I freeze again, by the way?
Yeah, it looks like you did freeze.
Oh.
I don't know what's going on. I think we should just proceed as long as people can hear him. I think we get the same effect.
I agree. I agree. Hopefully it was a cool facial expression that it froze on. Okay.
Yeah, it was just as cool as the last one.
Okay. So what I want to do now is if you observe, we've discussed two different ways. We now want to discuss the third option, and that is how are we going to do the same result set, but now calling our own serverless application that does some of this work behind the scenes. So let me explain. So back here in the code, when we're looking at the code, you'll notice that because I'm a client of our own API, I must in my client code produce these values. You can't make a call to our API without them, right?
Sure.
So that we're setting the scene to say, is there a way to actually call something without even having those from the client? What if I have multiple kinds of clients? I have a web client, a mobile client, maybe both iOS and Android, and or maybe I have even another server process running that needs to call it. So there's a variety of different calling clients. Is there a way that I could actually not have each one of them have to manage these security tokens?
Yeah, I mean, you would have a centralized backend, right?
Yes, correct. Where all of them can be managed uniquely without having to worry about the nitty-gritty of that API. And let's face it, here's another value to it. Suppose you're using your own location service API, and in the process, you wanted to switch out your underlying location services provider. So I'll give you an example. You created your own serverless application. It was using one of our competitors. You now realize it's so advantageous to use here. You could swap that underneath the hood, and as long as you maintain the same kind of signature calls, your clients won't know the difference, right? Sure. So it's a great way to do a swap. So what I'm going to do is I want to go over to the AWS Management Console.
Sounds good.
And so can you see that on the screen okay?
Yeah, I can see it. Maybe just zoom in one time.
Is that good?
That's probably good. If somebody in the chat says that it's still a little small, we can always zoom in again.
Okay, especially when we get to some of these next areas.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to showcase really how easy it is for someone to build what we're going to do. And that's by going into the serverless application repository from AWS services, or from this management console. If someone did not see this appear in a recently visited service like I have, you just have to type it right here, serverless application repository. But because it's right here, I'm going to click it. And now I have an opportunity for me to, I don't want to publish an application. I'm not going to create one. I want to see what's available so I can deploy an existing one. And I am going to type in the word here, map, and I'm going to look, and lo and behold, I see some of our APIs. You can see here technologies is in each one of these boxes.
Sure.
And I'm going to find the one that is specifically map image. And I'm going to click on it. What I'm doing is I now want to deploy this particular API into my environment for use.
Sure.
So it's going to say, what would you like to call this application name? I'm probably going to call it Map Twitch, because I don't think I've ever created that before. Now you'll notice it's asking for my here app code and my here app ID.
Yep.
So back to my project page. Here's my app code here. So I'll copy that. Go back over to the console and put that here for code. And then the ID. And place that over here. Of course, for anyone who's watching, if they have their app IDs and app codes, they would want to keep those things private, so they shouldn't be showcasing around like I'm doing here on the screen.
Sure.
But you get the point. Those are things that you would keep private.
Yeah.
So here's the here app ID and app code. This literally, Nick, believe it or not, I click the deploy button.
Yeah.
And what it's going to do is it's like, I'll take it from here. I'll take the wheel.
Sure.
Right. So
we have some comments coming in saying that they're just going to use your keys going forward.
Great. So let me explain what's happening on this screen while people are hijacking my IDs and codes. So what's happening is since I click deploy, it is creating all of the resources required to make this work. It is going to be creating all the security features necessary for this to work. It's going to create the Lambda function itself and deploy it into my environment. And once it's in my environment, I can do whatever I want with it.
Can you scroll down just a little bit? I know that our heads are blocking some of the page, so I just want to get the full scope.
What? Yeah. How's that look?
I think that'll do. That'll be fine.
Okay. Looks like it has been deployed.
No, it's fine.
So do you see that it says it has been deployed
I see it.
at the top there?
Yeah.
So I have all these resources that are available. I also have this thing called map image function that was created. If I click on that,
Yeah.
that is going to take me to the actual code that was created in the Lambda function to make this work.
So I have a question before we press on.
Please.
So we went through this serverless deployment option directly through Amazon. It looked like it was linked up directly with here. Is that the only way to do things, or is that the recommended approach because it's kind of all bundled together for you?
Great question. So you could do all of that from scratch if you wanted to.
All right.
It would be painful, but you could do it.
Sure. So if I wanted to go directly in Lambda and start doing all of this stuff myself, I could, right?
You could.
But it's not recommended.
Well, it's only recommended if you are someone who likes to spend enormous amounts of time trying to solve the problem. That could be done in just literally a minute.
Sure.
So I would say, yes, it's recommended for efficiency because you can always modify what's here.
Yeah. And this could be a question for another day, but what if you wanted to use serverless framework, which is a popular option when it comes to serverless? Does this kind of conflict?
I guess I would have to know more of the specifics. So
sure.
Probably should make that a more like of a use case scenario in the next one. But
yeah. No worries.
By the way, so we went from let's look and see what's available. We deployed it. Then we went ahead and we did deploy it, right? So we have all of those features there. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go to my dashboard. Or I'm sorry, I think it's in my applications where you could see that I have this application called Map Twitch.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm going there is because it's gonna show me the resources that were created. And you'll notice that one of those resources down below, just minutes ago, was this thing called the Here API Map Image Gateway.
Yes.
Okay. So when I click on that, it's going to show me something that's very, very important to have. I'm going to click on stages, and in the staging event, if I go here, or in this staging resource, do you see this invoke URL?
I do.
So, you don't have direct access to the Lambda function itself, but through this API gateway, we now have this URL, which I'm going to copy. I'm going to take that URL. I'm going to go over into my code for what I have as our SAR map image. You'll notice again, nothing in the headers other than a comment that's a backup in case this resource doesn't work. I have a backup, which is a good thing. Then I also have in the body tag, you'll notice there's no keys in here at all, right?
Yep.
But for the URL, I'm going to do this. I'm going to paste in this map image.
Sure.
The URL we just had. And then all we're seeing here on this string on line 21 is let's construct the API call, now calling our serverless Lambda versus calling the Here API directly.
Sure.
And then what do you think, Nick? Why don't you tell me, regardless of what's up here, what do you think is happening lines 22 through 32 or 31?
Yeah, so that looks like an old school JavaScript HTTP request that we're going to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably with that URL.
Yes.
And then we're doing the good old apply the source to our image. So that looks like the response.
That's correct. So pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Because you could see down below that it's really on line 30 that URL is the thing that's actually getting invoked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So I have added the URL here. I'm going to go over into this page. Now, this was a page that needs to be refreshed because
Sure.
this was from a previous one where I was doing testing. I am crossing my fingers, so to speak. And you know what? I think we have a problem. You know, my frozen look right now in Twitch is because I'm scared silly. I don't know what just happened. Why do I see a blank screen? I'm scared.
I don't know if that's a scared face. That looks kind of more like maybe an angry face. I don't.
So I'm going to go into my code here, into my developer portal view. Can you see what is the issue up here in my console?
So I'd recommend that you zoom in just one level again.
Let me see if it'll let me zoom in. Yeah,
it will.
It looks like it will.
So it looks like you have some cross-origin resource sharing issues.
Oh man, that's horrible. I wonder if there's anything we can do to solve this. So
do you have some context behind what those issues are? Like what is a course issue?
What? In fact, I know that you know it. Why don't you explain it?
I do know it.
You're so savvy. Why don't you explain it?
well, Michael, I thought you'd never ask.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so cross-origin resource sharing is a browser issue. So it's saying that we're trying to access an API on a different host from the application that's running in our browser. So in this case, we're running from our local file system. Could easily be local host as well. But this Amazon endpoint is somewhere on Amazon, and we're saying, you know what? If we're not on the same host or port, don't provide an access control origin, or don't whitelist it, and the browser, for security reasons, will just fail when it makes that request, because it shouldn't be making those requests.
Right. I've been staring at you the entire time you've been saying that because I was so fascinated. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I can't stop looking at how amazing that was. Okay.
Yeah, like Roberto Dev says that it keeps developers up at night, these CORS issues.
Oh, it's so true. It also keeps us up in the morning. So let me go over to our API gateway, and let's explain a solution to this problem. I'm going to go over into our resources. And when I go into the resources, I have our get method execution highlighted. For the actions, did you see that there's this menu option here called Enable CORS?
Sure.
I'm going to click on that right now. I'm watching you to see if you're looking. Okay.
I am looking.
Yep. See? Always watching. Do you notice that access control allow origin, and I have an asterisk there? It's like a wild card.
Yep.
I'm like, that's exactly what I need in order to solve this problem. So I'm going to click this Enable CORS and replace existing CORS headers. You good with that?
I am. And if you didn't want to add an asterisk, you could supply the host information of the browser application manually, right?
You are so smart. So this is exactly where people can take control, especially with the idea, Nick, that the API keys are no longer needed. You could still provide some access control here. So thanks for calling that out. Good. So I'm clicking the button. It says, are you sure you want to do all of this? I'm like, giddy up. Yes. And look at that. All those green check marks. That makes me feel pretty warm and fuzzy. Right?
Yeah, it does.
I am having a level of confidence now that I can't stop looking at you to see if you think that I have a level of confidence. But I'm going over to the serverless page. I'm going to refresh the screen again. You ready?
Yeah.
In 3, 2, 1.
And do you want to tell them the story about our morning now?
Yeah. So this is we had a blog post a while back on how to do this, and of course we've made modifications. We adhere, improve our code, and we are up to the latest stuff. And the modification that we did before to enable CORS is no longer the way it's done. So this morning we had such a fun time trying to determine how to do this once again. And the good news is it's improved because we don't even need to modify any of the code in the Lambda, which we once had to do. Now we don't even have to do that. But did you not see, like, I thought I saw green check marks here. So this is a nice little feature that we can share with the community. And that is, oh, and by the way, if you get to this point, you might also want to deploy this API. Because even though I have a whole bunch of green check marks, it has to be deployed essentially to itself. So I'm going to redeploy to the stage. You notice that there was an option for me to go to production or to another staging environment.
Yeah.
And I'll just deploy.
And we were so upset that this was the solution this morning, right?
Well, it depends on how you want to say upset. There was a moment of euphoria when I realized that was but yes, I understand what you mean.
It wasn't totally obvious.
Yes. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back over to this screen. I am going to refresh the screen.
Uh-oh.
Might be a caching thing.
There we go.
Yeah, it just came up. You were worried. I'm looking at you
I was a little
now.
worried.
I haven't even stopped looking at you, and I could tell that you were worried. Yeah. So there it is. You could see that the map image is there. So now I want to go back into the code and just talk about this difference here, because you called out something before in our code, and now I want you to at least try to help maybe the viewers understand, why was it before when we called our RESTful API, we can assign the SRC directly to the response. Why do I have to do this line 27? What's your thinking on that?
Because the response is no longer a URL.
That's correct. It's not a URL that represents an image. It's actually the data itself in base64. So what we're doing is we're appending to the source. We're saying, you know what? When we get the image data back on line 25, let's set the source of the image tag to data:image. And what this little moniker does here is it allows us to specify to render that image based on the raw data that we got back. And that's how it worked.
Sounds good.
Cool. So I would say let's recap, but I'm always going to be looking at you during this recap.
I'm going to pretend like I'm frozen so that way you think I'm not here.
Okay. We saw 3 different ways to call a map image. The first way was through our cool and exciting JavaScript 3.1. The second way was through a RESTful API call. A major distinction between these two is that if you call the image from REST, you are getting a static image, not an interactive image.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit of using our JavaScript API in the client, is that you get that full, rich, interactive image. In this case, it is just, a static image based on what we're calling.
Yeah.
And then finally, we saw that you can even bypass the use of our APIs, the app ID and the app code, by just calling your own API. That's how you have to look at line 16. You've created your own custom API that you can control and modify how you would want it to get used across all your various clients. And then we were able to see that you need to modify the result set for the map image anyway to use the raw image that comes back versus the just setting it to a URL.
Sure. I have a question coming in through the chat from
Yes.
I Only Wear Lacosta. I think that's how you say it.
Okay.
This person's asking, does this work with any provider? Can I use Azure, Netlify, etc. as my function provider?
So it's kind of interesting what the question is. So obviously we're in AWS connections, and we're talking about how to use our API within a serverless environment within AWS. If the question is, do we do this on other platforms? The answer is yes. So hopefully that answers that question.
All right. Is that a yes with no modifications to what we've done here so far, or a yes, but with a catch that you might have to change a few things?
It's a yes that we provide the similar behavior, but it's a completely different thing. I mean, it's totally different. Like for example, on a Microsoft platform,
Sure.
it's their functions, and it's a different approach, but we do offer it.
I got an update to that question. So this is more around the fact that you did that kind of automated deployment directly in AWS for the map tile.
That's correct.
Or the map image. Do those feature sets exist in the other providers, basically?
Yes. But
to do an automated kind of shortcut like that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, but again, done differently.
All right.
So I think that to stay true to our AWS connections episode and not go into the other platforms, I would say, yes, that's available. Perhaps we'll see episodes in the future regarding that for other platforms.
Maybe we'll have like an Azure connections then, right?
Who knew? Who
knew?
I
don't know.
Yes, I think you're on to something there, Nick. Any other questions?
Nothing as of now, but I will definitely interrupt you if there are. Just for a time check, we are at 11:40. Doesn't mean anything. Just giving you an update.
Oh, you know what? I'm literally at this point. I'm done. I just wanted to recap and review. So this is where we're at. It was just to show how. And I was going to say, if there was any questions, we can explore those. Otherwise, I'm just looking at you.
So just to confirm that, just so that way we have some clarity, we didn't have to make any manual changes to our Lambda function code at all. We just did that automated kind of shortcut, and we were rocking and rolling. Yes?
That is correct. I think, this code, which we did show, at least we provided everyone to see this is where you can go to see the code that was created. And you'll notice that it encapsulates one of the advantages. It already creates environment variables for you so that you don't have your raw app ID and app code actually in the code itself. So that's all done as a service for us. It makes it really easy. But we did not have to make one bit of code change in this whatsoever in order to make this work. The only thing we had to do was redeploy our API gateway to enable, allow the cores, which we did.
Now, if I wanted to make changes to that Lambda function that was automatically sent out, I could, right? I can make my own customizations?
Yes. In fact, a question I've had on this before is if you make changes here, does that somehow impact the grander template or whatever? And you have to look at it. This is a pure copy. It's a one-time deployment. Once it's in your world, it is yours to control. And even if the master, template or whatever or resource gets updated, it has nothing to do with what you have. It's just your code.
Got it.
I could tell because I just keep looking at you.
All right. I don't know what that means, but sure.
Well, I think I'm frozen looking at you.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking.
That's all I'm saying.
Sounds good. Yeah, then I mean, if you have no other content, I'd happily share some information as part of the outro of this particular episode.
Please do. Yes.
Hey guys.
Yes.
Hey Michael, why don't you disconnect and re-come in so we can do big heads for the last part. So we there we go.
Don't leave yet, everyone. We still have stuff to say. We have information.
Yeah, we got some outro talking points.
Do I need to disappear too?
No, it's fine. I just won't have labels come up for you.
Sure.
And
Peter's the puppet master behind the scenes.
I'm back.
Sweet. All right. Awesome. So for as far as outro information goes, this particular episode, if you missed half of it, don't worry. It's going to be available on Twitch probably shortly, and then YouTube in about a week. In regards to, if you have questions regarding this episode, make sure you join our Slack channel if you're not already a member. Maybe we can use Nightbot Peter to throw up a link. There it is in the chat. Perfect. You can also follow us on Twitter. The Here developer channel is Here Dev. I'm personally Enraboy on Twitter, and then Michael is Palermo4, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. We do have another AWS connection serverless episode coming up. I don't know if Michael wants to give a little preview about what's coming up next.
Well, essentially, I don't even remember the order, but we are going to do very similar, the same thing we did in today's episode, but we are going to explore using another API. Not all APIs, by the way, return like image data. It may just return JSON data. So we're going to see a different approach to how to deal with that kind of data that comes back. It might be the geocoder if my mind is working correctly, but if not, it'll either be that or places or weather.
Sure.
It's geocode.
And
Let's make
that
it
episode that episode's gonna come on July 31st. It's a Wednesday again, and it's the same time. It's 11 a.m. Pacific time.
It's a great way to end the month.
Yeah, and if you want to continue to get your Here Dev Twitch fix, we also have a Waypoints episode coming out next week, July 24th, same time. That's going to be part 2 of our React framework series. React.js.
Who will be all on that episode? You? Who else?
Yeah, that's going to be me, Peter, and Dylan.
Dylan comes back.
Yeah, Dylan is making another appearance.
All right.
Is there any shameless plugs that you want to share for this before we call it?
No, I think we're good. I think just keep, like you said at the beginning, make sure and subscribe to our Twitch channel here so that you can keep the updates coming.
Yeah, you'll get a notification when we go live, so that way you don't miss out.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone, for joining this episode.
Thank you.